Anxiety, bipolar disorder, and depression, we give mind-altering drugs like Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, Seroquel that alter gut motility and elevate blood sugar and increase and contribute to diabetes. Chronic neurological disease, what do? We give tricyclines, and we give other kinds of drugs that block B vitamins. High blood pressure, I'll get to that one in a minute. Headaches and migraines, we give pain medication. Diabetes, we give a whole slew of things, because now we're saying that all diabetics need to be on cholesterol-lowering drugs, whether their cholesterol is low or not. Okay, they need to be on preemptive blood pressure medications, whether their blood pressure is high or not, right? So we're trying to be preventative, right, and aggressive by using drugs to stop the problem that we assume might happen, instead of just telling them to go change their darn diet. Blood pressure medicine. So I told you I'd get to that in a minute. This is a new study. This is brand new research, and now there's a lawsuit with this one. We're now finding, and this was done at Mayo Clinic. So this isn't like, some little Men's Health Journal article where somebody wrote about opinions. This is done at Mayo Clinic, where they isolated and identified patients who were developing celiac disease. They thought these patients had celiac disease, okay? And they didn't have celiac disease. They had olmesartan toxicity. This is a drug given to lower blood pressure. And what was happening is the drug was damaging their gut and mimicking celiac disease. So it was causing villus atrophy. And when they removed the drug, the symptoms went away and the gut's healed. Okay, so this is one, I know I've heard it on the radio now, and a lawyer got wind of this, and there's, now somebody's going to make, some attorney somewhere is going to make a lot of money and leave a lot of people still sick. You see, this is a quote from the Dr. Murray of the clinic. We thought these cases were celiac disease initially because their biopsies showed features very like celiac disease, such as inflammation. What made them different was that they didn't have the antibodies in their blood typical of celiac disease. So they didn't have the positive antibodies, but they had positive biopsy. And when they removed the drug, they were able to recover these guys. And I've said this before, and I say it a lot online when I write and I journal, and I get attacked a lot for this, but I'm going to reemphasize it again because I think it's important to mention. We define celiac disease as villus atrophy, which is a flattening of the intestinal folds. In other words, there's folds in the intestine and they start to flatten. Look at that on a biopsy and we say, oh, you have celiac disease. Did you know parasites can cause villus atrophy? Soy can cause villus atrophy. Corn has been shown to cause villus atrophy. GMO foods have been shown to cause villus atrophy. So the very fundamental basis for which we diagnose celiac disease is flawed if we're assuming that all villus atrophy is only celiac disease as induced by wheat, barley, rye, and oats. Does that make sense? The top 5 prescription drugs dispensed in the United States. Pain medication, cholesterol drugs, blood pressure drugs, number 3. Think about all the gut problems we have in this country, right? All the commercials you're hearing now. Hypothyroidism, which is directly linked to gluten sensitivity. Acid reflux, and antibiotics. Right? So out of those medicines we were just talking about, right? These are the top 5. This isn't like esoteric rare drugs that are being prescribed. The average adult in their 50s is on 5 or more medications. I've had patients come to see me. We get them off all their medications because they get healthy again and they don't need them. And then they go back to their regular doctor, and their doctor's like drop-jawed that they could be off their medications and not have the same problems. But doesn't ask them what they did or how they got there. It blows me away because as a doctor, I would want to know. If a patient came into me and we were having trouble getting them fixed up and I couldn't figure out what was wrong, and they said, I did this and I got better, I'd be like, tell me more. Teach me. Right? As a doctor, we have a teachable moments every day when we talk to patients. The gluten sensitivity Hydra. You guys know what a mythological Hydra is, right? The Greek mythology. You chop off the head of the Hydra, what happens? He grows 2 more. Okay? So for every one, he gets 2 more. So think of the heads of the Hydra as the symptoms induced by gluten, chemical toxins, the wrong food, the wrong medications. Right? And every time you throw a drug at one of these symptoms again, you're chopping a head off, only to sprout 2 more that might be different. Right? Treating symptoms with medicine doesn't resolve the origin of the problem. Very, very important concept from today. If we look at, I told you I would get to stomach acid and stomach blocking drugs. This is the Hydra for that, right? We could draw a Hydra for any of these medications. When we block stomach acid, we induce folate, zinc, vitamin A, protein, calcium, iron, and B12 deficiency. What happens just if we just took protein? Now we have immune suppression. Now we have increased infection. We have inability to gain muscle, so we have muscle atrophy. We already have a person that has this problem is already sedentary. They already have muscle atrophy, so now we've just heightened it. We've just made it worse. Do you know what the number one way to increase your lifespan, if you wanted to live 20 years longer and happier and healthier, the number one thing you could do to do that is to maintain your muscle. That's why as we see people get older, and the advice, a lot of the advice is you're getting too old, you need to slow down, you need to stop doing this. No, you don't. You're getting old, you need to keep going. What is there for you if you just stop? You get depressed. You get sad. There's no more, you don't have skin in the game anymore. So you just kind of drift away and die. We don't want that. We want people to stay in the game, right? There was a documentary, I think she was 93 or 97, I don't remember. Japanese woman, scrambled up a tree like a squirrel to pick a piece of fruit. The reporter that was interviewing said, "How did you do that?" Her answer was super simple. She said, "I never quit." Don't ever quit. So compounding damage, 4 billion prescription drugs ingested in the U.S. each year. 4 billion prescription drugs. 70,000 chemicals used commercially, 3,000 chemicals added to our food, 10,000 chemicals are used in food processing, preserving, and storage. The EP estimates that our homes are now 5 to 100 times more toxic than outdoor air. That's a dangerous cup of soup right there. And I don't say that to depress you guys. You have an option. You have power. You can exercise control. You have to start with what I call fundamentals. And when I start with fundamentals, I can just go through this in my brain. We have somebody with existing disease and existing condition. Okay? So the question is, do they have it or don't they? And you can see from no, it says, well, wellness and prevention. If you're not sick, we just want to maintain wellness, right? Keep doing what you're doing. If you are, we now have to start going through the process of ruling out why. What are fundamentals to illness? Fundamentals to illness are basics, right? Basic fundamentals. It's what we eat. It's the nutrition that we get in. It's whether or not we have infectious disease. It's whether or not we're allergic to things, whether or not we've been exposed to chemical toxins and those have built up and created an issue. It's whether or not our gut communicates with our food and communicates with our bodies well, right? These are fundamentals. If you don't look there first, it doesn't matter what drug you give a patient, what drug you give a person, you're not fixing anything. Does that make sense? You guys may have seen me, I draw this a lot. It's called the triangle of health, right? And there's three sides to the triangle. There's the mental, the physical, and the chemical. And the mental has to do with spiritual, emotional, who you hang out with, your relationship with God if you're religious, or your relationship with Buddha or any other, whoever, whatever you, if you're sound there, right? If you're sound in your mind. Chemistry has to do with what you bring into your body that either helps or hurts you. And that's food, air, light, water, chemicals, pollutants. The physical aspect is the physical parameter, right? A person could be underweight, a person could be overweight, a person could have scoliosis, a person could have arthritis so they don't walk right, and they develop muscular imbalances that leads to pain, and now they can't get off the couch because it hurts too bad to get off the couch, and they just continue to deteriorate. The physical body is so important and so undressed in medicine today. There was a video I watched, it was a commercial from the 1940s talking about posture, because kids in school were doing this over their desk. And so the commercial was, look, kids, quit leaning over and slumping. When you slump, this is what happens. Your muscles, you get an imbalance in your muscles. Your lungs don't fill, so you don't get adequate oxygen to your brain, so you can't think as well in school, so your grades will suffer. Right? It was all these wonderful connections that were being made in 1940 that completely get ignored today that are crucial. But your ability to ambulate is only part of it. Movement is crucial. Right? Movement is life. How many of you could do a full range of motion squat? How many of you can lift your body weight? How many of you could do a full pull-up? How many of you could do body movement based on body weight? If you're answering that question in your head as no, then you have a physical problem. Whether you are addressing it or not is another issue. The 5 critical elements for healthy gut function. These are 5 things that when we have a broken gut, when the gut is inflamed, when there's gastric reflux, irritable bowel syndrome, when there's leaky gut, these things have to be addressed, right? So part of that trifecta that we started out talking about, if you have those 3 things, these things have to be addressed. GALT, gastro-associated lymphoid tissue. 70% of your immune system is GALT. It's like tonsils that are wrapped around your small intestine. So you got tonsils in your throat. Imagine GALT is the tonsils of your intestine. Tight junctions are proteins that hold your cells in your intestine together. Your intestine has only one layer of cells. And how do they stay compacted and together? Those tight junctions have to be intact. Mucosal IgA. This is your first line of defense. This is called SIgA, mucosal IgA. IgA, by the way, stands for immunoglobulin A. It's a type of antibody. We make it in our spit. That's how important it is. It's in your spit. It's in your mucus secretions. You ever eat dairy and you're like, my nose is congested. You ever do that? Why are you doing that? Because you're making IgA to fight the dairy that you're eating because you're reacting to it, most likely. Friendly bacteria. It's the good bacteria. And then stomach acid. You have to have stomach acid intact, right, as we talked about earlier, because otherwise you suffer all those consequences of poor stomach acidity. I said before, healing fully can take 3 years. We have to start systematically. You don't just pull the nail out of the tire and keep driving it, right? You pull the nail out of the tire, so you remove the bad. You remove the food allergies. You remove the environmental toxins to the greatest ability that you can. You remove infections if they're present, right? And if there's any inflammation that's ongoing, you have to put the fires out. Think of inflammation and your house. If your house is on fire, okay, and let's say that this side of the house is on fire, this side of the house isn't on fire, right? But there's smoke damage over here from the fire that's going on over here. So you start repairing the smoke damage over here, but you haven't addressed the fire yet. That's what a lot of people do when they pound down supplements. I'm going to take this supplement and this green drink and this product before I ever even address the inflammation, right? So they're never really getting to the core of that fire before they start trying to treat or trying to replace tissue. So it's very important to remove the bad first, because removing the bad takes care of a lot of that all in and of itself. Phase 2 is replace and repair. Right? Replace and repair means put good bacteria back in the gut, put good food with good nutrients back into the mix, okay? And get your environmental nutrients. Who knows what environmental nutrients are outside of food? Beyond food, what are the environmental nutrients? Sleep, stress management, sunshine, okay? Air. Those are nutrients. You can't live without them. You can't live without oxygen. You can't live without sunshine. You could, but you'd be miserable. Right? We have to put those environmental nutrients back in as well as the food-based nutrients. We have to put the ingredients, in essence, that our body needs to heal and repair. What are the ingredients that it uses? Pop question. What are the 7 ingredients your body's made out of? 7.
Water.
Carbs, fats, proteins. Somebody said it. Water. Any other guesses? Got 3 more? Nucleic acids, which are DNA and RNA, which we get from eating food. Okay. Vitamins and minerals. 7 ingredients. Now, your body missing any one of those 7 ingredients can break down. Why don't all doctors measure those? It's fundamental nutrition, fundamental science. You have to put those 7 things in because, first of all, I like to measure whether or not you need those 7 things, or which ones you do need versus which ones you don't, so that if we are going to supplement, we're targeted as opposed to guessing, right? And now we can plug in the right things that you might need. And then we can go through the restoration process. So once we go through replacing the nutrients, repairing the damage, we go through that restoration maintenance phase where now you're healing. Now you just have to maintain and keep doing what you're doing that got you there. And you can't slip off the wagon and say, oops, I'm going on vacation and I'm going to go and just destroy myself. Okay? Because that's what you're doing, right? When you go on vacation and you just eat what you want, you're destroying yourself. And the maintenance consists of exercise, and it consists of rest, and it consists of persistent sunshine and stress management and positive thoughts. You know, a wise doctor once told me, you are what you think, what you eat, and what you do. That's part of how we become better, right? And if you have bad thoughts, negative thoughts, they've done studies on water where if you sing pretty to water and you measure like the wavelength and the energy that the water's putting out, the wavelength, it's different than if you cuss at it. Seriously. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't think really anybody does. I mean, it's a novel experiment. What does it actually mean in terms of human physiology? I don't think anybody really truly knows. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're 66% water. So if yelling at us can change that molecular wavelength and configuration, what is that doing potentially to our cells? Nobody really knows, but we can surmise and use good common judgment and common sense to say probably positive thoughts are a good thing. And if any of you ever really want to read a good book on positive thinking and the power of the mind, I would encourage, there's a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. It's a fantastic book. You should read it. You should read it 20 times. When I talk about healing essentials, what I mean, I talk about healing essentials or fundamentals. We kind of talked about that just a minute ago, but we test for specific food and environmental toxic exposures, and we remove what we know we need to remove. We test for and address any underlying infection. We identify nutritional deficits and we correct them. We perform, if necessary, detoxification, right? We put fires out and we take away chemicals, so we detox, we repair, and we support. Those are fundamentals. You have to have that in that order happening. You can't start backwards. You can't detoxify if you haven't put a fire out, right? You can't detox. If you're eating garbage every day and you do a detox program and you're still eating garbage, you're not going to get a whole lot of good out of that detox program. These are some of the main tools that I use. And you guys, we have an information table in the back too. Detox C, Ultra Liver Detox, Ultra Immune IgG Biotic Defense, Gluten Shield, Ultra Acid, Inflame Repair, Kelomax. These are just different tools that I use supplementally to help people expedite this process. And then, of course, lastly, self-respect. Be good to yourself. It isn't selfish to take care of you. You know, a lot of I hear this mostly from women. If you're a woman and you've thought this, then rethink this. I got to take care of little Johnny before I take care of me. Little Johnny's more important. Well, if you don't take care of you, how are you going to take care of little Johnny? Because what you're doing by not taking care of you is you're teaching little Johnny that it's okay to not take care of yourself, right? Take care of yourself first and lead by example, and everything else falls into place, right? If I stood up here overweight and sick with psoriasis all over my skin, how believable would I be? None. Nobody would listen. We have a bonus today for anybody who's here, and I'm going to extend this through tomorrow. And this is if you go online and you use the code, and there's a promo code box. So go online, you can see there where it says GF Products, and that's glutenfreesociety.org. If you click that, gluten-free products, it'll open up this tab. And if you use that promo code Trifecta, you can save 15% on anything that you get. But that'll expire tomorrow night. So, and that is for tomorrow. Okay. Questions. I'm going to open it up to questions before we move on to our smorgasbord of food over there. Okay, who's got questions? In the back. Speak loud.
My sister is on hemodialysis. I saw a product, a protein product. She's low on iron and protein. Would she be able to use that? Would it hurt her?
So the question is, your sister's on kidney dialysis, hemodialysis, and you're wondering if the protein product, the ultra protein, is going to harm her.
Would it be good for her?
It may or may not. It's hard to answer that question because I would have to see her blood work. I mean, if her protein levels are low, it probably would be very helpful. But if her kidneys are broken and not working well, you can over-protein somebody. So, you have to be careful with that. It's not something that I would recommend. Somebody on dialysis is not something I would just recommend taking a bunch of supplements without guidance. So the best advice the best advice I can give you is she needs to talk to somebody about that who's knowledgeable about that. I don't know if her doctor's knowledgeable about nutrition or not, but no, absolutely not. Look, here's the thing. I mean, you can buy supplements from Walmart, but what you got to realize when it comes to the supplement industry, literally you get what you pay for. I know what raw things cost because I formulate a lot of my own stuff. I have to go find the raw ingredients, source the raw ingredients, pay for the raw ingredients, get it to a manufacturer, get them to put it together, right? I know what it costs. I know the man hours involved, and I can tell you from insider personal information, just to give you an example, one of the most common multivitamin formulations sold at CVS, Walmart, and a number of these other places costs about 17 cents to make. And they sell it for $9 a bottle. What you're getting is garbage. You're not going to absorb it. There's a bunch of fillers. There's a bunch of dyes. There's potentially gluten in it because of filler, right? So I don't recommend buying supplements at the local, CVS or Walmart. Does that make sense? Other questions? It's a quiet crowd today, yeah?
I was reading some news articles about studies, and actually what you were saying today actually made me feel better about it, hearing about more harmful things about antibiotics. I read that in these studies that have come out that they're predicting like in the next 10 or 20 years that the total effectiveness of most commonly prescribed antibiotics will be null and void and won't work at all. Do you know anything about that?
Well, we're definitely facing antibiotic resistance. I mean, that's a big major issue. It's going to become more and more of a problem. I think we're going to see a new plague come out of this in the next 30 or 40 years. Nobody can really predict it, but I think we're going to see a new infection come out that's extremely antibiotic resistant. It's going to knock out a good part of the population. And most people that are experts, most immunologists believe that to be the case. We're headed for a big problem. Even if we make changes today, we're still headed for a major issue as it relates to germs. Yeah. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Is there, say you don't have the best self-control, you're human, what do you do? Is there a good way to break even? Like, I'd love to be gluten-free. I don't like to drink a beer. Apparently that might kill me.
So the question is, what if you're human and you don't have great self-control and you like to have a beer every once in a while? Is it going to kill you? The answer is yes, by about 26 years. So you have to ask yourself this question. And I say that very seriously. I mean, you have a choice to either enjoy that occasional beer, right? I mean, and this is under the auspice that you're gluten sensitive. Because I don't know whether or not you are. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But if you are, what do we know about gluten exposure? For people who are gluten sensitive who get regular gluten exposure, we know they die on average about 26 years earlier than the average population, and they also develop about 6 to 7 more autoimmune diseases in their lifetime. So it's a miserable process. You're young and your body's resilient. How long is that going to last?
Forever?
No. That's what we call hubris, right? I mean, when we're young and we believe we're going to last forever, I mean, the reality is your body does start to break down and you do hit a breaking point. And it's hard to know that. It's hard to believe that when you're young. And I don't say that to put you to a fault. I just say, look, I know where I'm at in my own head. And that is, I'm not perfect either, and I'm human too. And there's times where I have an occasional cheat meal, and I don't ever eat gluten, but I'll eat things that probably aren't good for me that I shouldn't eat. And I always pay a price. And every time I pay a price, I say, I'm not going to do that again. And then 8 or 9 months rolls by, and my memory of that price is a little bit diminished in my head, right? And I pay the price again. And I think as humans, we're all going to do that because we just live in an environmental world where socially that food is always just being hammered and bombarded into our face, right? I don't think anybody's ever going to be perfect. None of us are Jesus, right? So, but you got to strive. You got to strive for optimum. You got to strive for the best you can be. And don't be satisfied with mediocrity. I challenge all of you. Don't ever be satisfied with mediocrity. You all have gifts and talents. And the only way you're ever going to see those gifts and talents come to fruition is by taking care of number one, so that number one can flourish those gifts and talents, if that makes sense. Yes?
Okay, so what's the best way to go gluten-free? Just rip the Band-Aid off, go cold turkey? I mean, or how do you wind down and make it to where that's where you get to? I mean, what's the best
way to go gluten-free? Cold turkey or titration? That answer is right and wrong depending on who you are, right? If I know that you're not a cold turkey person and I put you in a cold turkey environment, I just decreased your odds of success. If I know that you need to wean, that you need to process this information and you need to work into it and learn and go through that learning curve, then I'm going to support that, right? And you know who you are better than I do in terms of what kind of person you are. It's like the alcoholics and the cigarette smokers. What's the best way to quit, right? It depends on who you are. Some of them do well with a patch. Some of them do well with these artificial cigarettes. Some of them do well cold turkey. You just have to know who you are. I would say if you're chronically and deathly ill, cold turkey is the only way to go because you're on your deathbed, right? And so a lot of my patients, I've got to pull them and I've got to hit them with reality. You're going to die within the month if you don't make changes right now. You don't have time to learn this stuff. You don't have time to go 12 weeks and ease into it. There is no easing into it unless you want to die, right? But you're not in that situation, obviously, or you wouldn't be standing here in this meeting looking vibrant and alive, right? So, point being, there is no right answer. The best way to go gluten-free is to make up your mind to do it and just do it. And however you get there, right? There's more than one way to skin a cat, right? There's more than one right way to get to the same place. You just have to get there the way that works best for you. But don't create excuses for yourself along the path. Don't say, I'll start Monday, right? And I say that, like I've said that before, and I know you guys have probably heard me say, when we give ourselves permission to start on Monday, what we're really saying is that we're going to destroy ourselves all weekend. And then when Monday rolls around, we're going to feel so bad that we don't have the energy to start on Monday, so then we say we're going to start next Monday. You see what I'm saying? And then we create this cycle of always thinking toward that Monday when we're going to start. Don't put those barriers up in your way. That's the best answer I could give you. Hope that makes sense. Other question? Yes?
What are your thoughts on rice?
Don't eat it. What are my thoughts on rice? Rice has a form of gluten in it. And although traditionally a lot of people say, hey, rice is safe, it's one of the, what we would consider to be one of the gluten-free grains, it does have a form of gluten in it. And it has been shown to create inflammation in the gut for people with gluten sensitivity. It is genetically modified. That's another whole different kind of issue with it. It's got a lot of cadmium in it, and that's another, cadmium is a toxic metal, that's another issue. So, you know, we could say there's 3 fundamental rules to eating when we're thinking about food. The first rule is you can't get healthy and you cannot stay healthy eating food that is not healthy. So we would think about rice in terms of whether or not it's healthy. Does that make sense? And if we're eating rice that's genetically modified full of cadmium, regardless of its gluten status, that isn't healthy. That's not helping. Does that make sense? The second rule is don't eat what you're allergic, intolerant, or sensitive to. And I fall under the belief, I think there's enough research and enough scientific evidence and enough anecdotal evidence to say that rice does have gluten in it, and rice does create problems for patients with gluten sensitivity, because I see it, and I've seen it for 13 years in my clinic. So I hope that answers your question. And by the way, the third rule is if you feel bad when you eat it, quit eating it. Okay? Next question. Yes?
What does smoking do to the gut and then in general, I guess, consequences?
What does smoking do to the gut? Well, smoking causes oxygen deprivation. So basically, you're poisoning yourself with oxygen deprivation. You're in energy deficit all the time. That's why smokers are always short of breath. okay, and that's why their blood pressures have to go up to accommodate the increased blood flow because there's a lack of oxygen. And remember, when we sit down for a meal and we're oxygen deprived, where does all of our blood go? Boom, right to the gut. It goes there, why? So we can digest our food. If we're in a state of oxygen deprivation, then all that blood going to the gut, it's there to try to create and generate energy to help us digest our food. We now have digestive disorder. Aside from the other toxic chemicals and aside from all the other things that we know that smoking can create and contribute to. Other questions?
What about sunscreens?
What about sunscreen? I don't believe in sunscreen.
I mean, every time you go to the doctor, they put on sunscreen.
Sure they do. Most of the doctors that you go to are the epitome of dishealth, right? Would you go to a financial advisor who lived under a bridge in a box? So that's, I don't say it to be harsh, but I mean, the reality is,
They always said it's so important with kids. I mean, we're
why? Why is sunscreen important? Let's talk about this first. How is it important to coat your child in a chemical concoction that we know causes cancer so that we can block vitamin D production, which prevents cancer?
I think that's part of
Okay?
vitamin D.
Well, no, it's not a think, it is. We know that. Where we could really just apply some good old-fashioned common sense and say,
It's so bad if you're at the pool with your grandkids in your house.
it's not about how you look, and don't worry about how other people view you. I just look at other people, and if they're looking at me funny, I'll point something out to make them feel uncomfortable, and then we'll all be uncomfortable together, right? But no, in all seriousness, how do you avoid, what should you do? Well, the first thing that you should do is eat right, because we know that people who eat right don't burn as much, right? Because the food that provides antioxidants protect you from UV damage in your skin. One of the best forms of sunscreen is a pint of blueberries before you go out in the sun. Eat them. Okay, that's my sunscreen. That's what I use. If I'm going out on a boat, if I'm going to the water, if I'm going to the beach, I'm eating blueberries. I'm taking blueberries with me. Yes, do it with my kids. I do it with my adults. I even do it with my dogs, right? So, now there are studies. We've done studies where we've shown that cancers will develop in these studies. Some of these studies were done in mice where we're in space and we were subjecting them to solar radiation. And we were feeding some of the mice blueberries, we were feeding some of the mice sugars, and we were feeding some of the mice nothing, right? And the ones that were fed nothing actually developed more cancer. The ones that were fed blueberries didn't, right? So we know that it prevents a lot of that UV damage, a lot of that solar damage from penetrating and destroying the DNA in the skin and creating or contributing to skin cancer. So I would say use good judgment, though. Everybody in here knows the limitation of their skin, right? If you know I burn every time I'm out in the sun. If I'm out 12 minutes, I burn. If I'm out 10, I don't. Right? Whatever that magic number is. Well, no, but you don't lather it up. Whatever that magic number is, apply it. Go for 10. And then if you do that for a week, the next time you go, you'll be able to go for 15. Your body adapts, right? You make more pigment to protect yourself. But if you're going to be out at the beach, if you're going to be on a boat and there's glaring water and reflection and a lot of sun, don't stay out that long. That's the common sense part. Or be under the shade. Right? Wear clothes, light clothing, wear hats, but don't smother up with all that chemical cream. That's ridiculous. Yeah. Time your event too. Time your occasion to be in the sun, not to be at noon when it's 104 degrees. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? I have a few online questions I want to just answer, and I think everybody will benefit from. Okay. I am